Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. We're just letting some people come into the room, but thank you for joining us. We'll get things underway shortly. Okay, so we are all spotlighted there now. I'm just going to wait a few more minutes to let a few more people in the room, and then we will get started. Thank you for joining. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm sure more people will be coming into the room, so forgive me if I look distracted, but as they come in, I have to let them in. So just bear with while I do that. But good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on inclusive recruitment and team diversity. My name is Atlin Ford. I'm a Diversity Forum Associate alongside JC Stewart, and I'm an inclusion consultant. And today we're going to be discussing the importance of diversity and inclusion in the social investment sector, with a specific focus on practical strategies for recruiting and retaining diverse talent and fostering inclusive team environments. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to post your questions and comments in the chat throughout the session. If we could all just put ourselves on mute, that would be great. I can hear a little bit of background noise. That would be wonderful. Okay, great. So before we dive into the discussions, let's introduce our esteemed panel, who you can see are all spotlighted here today. So firstly, Samantha is the HR manager for Charity Bank. She's a level 7 qualified chartered member of CIPD and has over 20 years experience of working within human resources and recruitment, both nationally and internationally, within the not-for-profit and private sectors. And then we have Murphy, who's a specialist, brings specialist knowledge in enterprise development, social investment, impact funds, and recruitment through her experience developing and delivering investment funds, learning programs, and board development projects. She has acquired a deep understanding of the importance of special recruitment and search to enhance the impact of funding offers. Thank you both. And last but certainly not least, Pete. Pete has worked as a headhunter in the financial services sector, primarily in mortgages for over 20 years, representing intermediary lenders and engaging with specialist targets and motivating them to consider their career and supporting and motivating individuals along the way. He's recognised as a specialist lending solutions change maker, and Pete has played a very active role in Amy and Imila's diversity and inclusivity working groups and working parties, and that's how we have connected through those groups. So thank you all for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Okay, so if we can also just ensure that we can focus on the spotlights, people that are here in the room today, maybe everyone else can put their cameras off, that would be great. And then we can just focus on those people who are spotlighted on the panel today. So to kick things off, before we start the discussion, I just want to do a bit of a Menti poll to get some feedback from everyone in the room today with regards to recruitment and team diversity. So this is the question here. What is the biggest challenge your organisation faces when it comes to inclusive recruitment and team diversity? So you can use the QR code to access it, or you can go to the website menti.com and use the code there, 19699665. It'd be great to get your thoughts on this, to really understand the challenges that people are facing. And I guess from a Diversity Forum perspective, it will really help us to understand how we can help and support, what content we could share, etc. So the options are lack of diversity in leadership and board positions, a lack of diverse talent pool in the social investment sector, unconscious bias in recruitment processes, difficulty in creating an inclusive workplace culture, and lastly, limited resources and budget for diversity and inclusion initiatives. It'd be great just to get your thoughts on that as we move forward with this session, so that we can, as I said, help and support in the best way that we can. So I'll leave that running just for a little bit longer, and then we will get the discussion underway. As I said, if you have any questions or even comments, it would be great if you could leave those in the chat, and then we can come back to them later. But also just the comments, always really great to see and to share your experiences as well, because this is a safe space, and we really would like to hear your thoughts and have a really insightful discussion from the panelists, but also from all the participants here. Okay, thank you everyone. So we seem to see on the Menti that the lack of diversity in leadership and board positions seems to be quite high, but also limited resources and budget for diversity and inclusion initiatives. So thank you everyone for sharing that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and return to the panel and kick off the questions. So the first thing I'd like to ask is, what are the unique challenges and opportunities that social investment organisations face in recruiting and retaining diverse talent? Sam, is it okay if I come to you first on this one?
Of course. So really for us, we have both challenges and opportunities. We're, for those that don't know who Charity Bank is, we're quite unique in the financial sector in that we're a bank that provides loans to the social enterprises and charities, but we do that by having savings accounts for anyone to invest, which then allows us to support those charities and social enterprises. So in terms of the challenges that we face is that often as a quite small bank, we only have 86 staff in our employment at the moment, but we are trying to attract candidates that do have a level of experience that they can bring into the organisation. And quite often that's from, they will need to have had experience within other banking environments. And so we have recruitment challenges in terms of the packages that we offer. So we're really looking for people that want to come out of the banking industry, perhaps where they get the high bonuses and come into it and actually be part of an organisation that has a good sense of purpose, that's putting something back into the community. So that kind of has two sides to that coin, in that it can be a challenge to us, but also a great opportunity for those people that have had experience from elsewhere and now wanting to put it to good purpose within an organisation. For us, we find that perhaps the group that we're trying to attract isn't as diverse as we would hope it to be. So it's about really being able to send the message out there to the type of organisation that we are very inclusive, and being able to send that out through our messaging. And again, being a very small organisation, it's really a lot about word of mouth, perhaps, rather than sort of big displays of advertising and things as well. So it is about that network that gets used, but also making sure that we are in the forefront of sort of social media, and our website is really informative and gives people a good feel of what we're about. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight.
It does. I think that's a very interesting challenge in terms of the pool of candidates you're looking for and the reasons why they'd want to come and work for you. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Murphy, it'd be great to get your thoughts on some of the challenges and opportunities that you see.
There we go, still can't remember to unmute. I think touching on what Sam said around that kind of looking for a nexus of financial skills and social impact understanding, you know, both industries, the financial services and philanthropy, have been, you know, renownedly undiverse. So it is a challenge, and I think that gives us opportunities to open up roles to be more inclusive. You know, we might not have a huge track record within particular industries, so we can work with emerging leaders, which is one of the things I do at Careers for Change, to bring people in early careers from diverse backgrounds and support their career trajectory to come into roles. So we are creating more diverse talent pools. I think there's also a lot of room for, you know, making good decisions, because we're doing social investment and working with beneficiaries. Bringing people in that have lived experience and direct understanding of the challenges that the organisations who are here today are looking to face is a really great way to bring in new ideas.
Great, I nearly lost the mute button there myself. Thank you, Murphy. That's a really good response. So moving on then to the next one then, really, because you've touched on this, both in terms of the struggles with kind of the candidate pool, But what specific sourcing strategies do you employ to reach underrepresented groups and attract diverse candidates? Murphy, since you kind of touched on that, could I kind of go back to you on that one, if that's okay?
Perfect. Saves me risking, not unmuting. Yes, we do a number of different things. You know, we advertise in various different groups. We're part of specialist networks. We have partnerships with different organisations. We're working with the Conduit at the moment on their Impactful Careers programme, which is bringing in diverse people at the kind of a graduate level to help mentor them. There's other ways that we can do it as well in terms of advertising in different platforms, using different methods of advertising. So being able to offer candidates an opportunity to speak with us and debunk roles prior to them applying. You know, there's a high amount of imposter syndrome in this sector. And we do see people from diverse backgrounds perhaps not putting themselves forward for roles if they haven't completely understood it, if there's a lot of jargon, or if we're not maybe advertising in the right places. So going out and meeting candidates where we are, we see more diversity coming in through that way, and then partnering with different groups. And then the language, I'd say, is a really clear one. I think also within job descriptions to talk about the potential career progression, you know, understanding what that role might mean in the future. The public sector has a really great pool of diversity, and a lot of that is because the security and sort of opportunity to progress is much more transparent than we have in this sector.
Yeah, some great ideas there. And again, I guess from the attendees, if you have any other suggestions or ideas or inspired by what's been spoken about today, do please share it in the chat. I'd like the idea of looking at the language and speaking about the kind of career pathways that are available, because it's not necessarily the sourcing strategies, but in terms of the pool that is there, really reassuring them that they can apply for these roles. So I think that's a really good one. And also what Sam mentioned before with regards to the purpose. You mentioned the public sector, and I'm sure with regards to the purpose that some of the social investors have, that would potentially appeal to some of the more diverse people applying for these roles. Sam, do you want to share some thoughts in terms of any other specific sourcing strategies that you're using that are working well?
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, we absolutely want to try and work on our diversity and inclusivity in the organisation, recognising that we've been quite small and had some rapid growth in the last couple of years. And as Murphy sort of touched on, it is around bringing people into the industry and kind of growing them and giving them opportunities. And that's something that we've not been of a size to be able to do that, but something we're certainly looking at going forward in terms of sort of apprenticeships and those sort of things to help develop that sort of space and provide those opportunities. But right now we've been using the Applied platform, which I don't know if people are familiar with, but it's helped us move away from being focused on just using CVs as part of the application. It's really made us have some very good internal conversations with managers around the job description, and are we being very fixed in that view, and is there transferable skills that perhaps people can bring in. But also as part of the application process, it isn't just about submitting a CV. They now are required to complete some SIFT questions, which gives us a little bit of insight into that person's level of experience, knowledge, and skills that they could perhaps bring into the role, and not necessarily always direct. That can be those transferable skills and knowledge and experience as well. It allows, I guess, candidates to get a bit of a better feel for the organisation as well, and a bit of buy-in, because there is a bit of time spent in completing that, those SIFT questions. It does bring its own challenges. We do have AI, which we have to sort of think about, and it is around positioning those questions so that they aren't too in-depth, but capture enough information. But we have felt that that's been really useful in broadening the types of applications that we receive, rather than just a CV. And actually the whole process is that not just one manager or two managers shortlisted anymore just from a CV. We have a panel of managers at different levels within the organisation that review those applications. So it gives a broader aspect as well. So it helps, hopefully, and it has helped remove some of those conscious or unconscious biases that may exist as well, because you've got those different viewpoints coming in. So we found that's been hugely beneficial in that sort of progress of increasing that diversity of applications and going through the process with our organisation.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's interesting to hear about the applied kind of platform, and maybe others might be interested in using it. So thank you for sharing that. I guess just delving into it a bit deeper, really, in terms of how can you ensure that your recruitment processes are inclusive and equitable, from the job descriptions, which you kind of touched on, interview techniques, and how do you create a positive candidate experience and really cater to their needs, especially for those who are from underrepresented groups? And Pete, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. You've been a bit quiet there. From your experience dealing with candidates, can you let us know kind of what your thoughts are in terms of what they're looking for in terms of more of an inclusive process, and what would enable more underrepresented groups and more diverse candidates to want to kind of get stuck into the recruitment process with these organisations?
Massive topic. Transparency, authenticity are the two words that immediately spring to mind. And I think that's a two-way street. Actually, I think the more an employer creates an environment where the employee can be authentically themselves, the better the selection decision is inevitably going to be, and vice versa. If the employer is, warts and all describing what their business is about, what their value system ultimately looks and feels like culturally, the employee then has got a better chance of deciding whether it's the right place to invest the next passage of their career. So it's the how. How do you make it more transparent? How do you make it more authentic? I guess is the heart of my point. And I think there's so many different elements to it. One is, don't be fixated in driving your recruitment process to measuring it on the speed to hire. That just creates a very short-term personified outlook. But actually think about it then with the candidate experience. What's your working model? Do you need them in the office 5 days a week? The more that you can extend flexibility, the argument follows, and certainly the production numbers suggest that you will get a better return from your employee if you find the right formula between office working and some element of remote. It also increases, obviously, the benefit of accessibility then if work from home becomes a feature of that. Particularly, I read a piece about the States have welcomed 2 million disabled workers back into the workplace in the last 2 years, just by extending the optionalities of working from home. I think you're then into the transparency of salary. Are we all talking about the same numbers, or are you low, you high, and is that an arbitrage that could ever be beaten? I'm not totally convinced that you have to advertise your salary upfront with a banding as an employer, but what I am convinced of is, as an employee, you should be able to state your salary expectations, and that necessitates, there's no reason then for the employer to dig into what your previous salary was, because that's irrelevant and bakes in biases that might have existed before through circumstantial changes, which often are bigger biases upon minoritized groups. But moreover, the salary expectation piece is simply, I will come and work for you if you're going to pay me something in that region, so you can interview me and entertain me on that basis. We both know where we are. We don't need to have published the banding, as long as what your salary expectations are fall within our capacity to deliver on it. So I think that for me it's a small piece of detail, but it's a really authentic way of saying, we're going to find where your value in this organization rests, and we're going to be fair and open on it. And I think then the fair and the openness comes naturally through lots of other engagement points in a candidate experience. And the one for me that is the biggest brand reputation, or one of the lot, is feedback. How effective, constructive, actionable is the feedback that you provide candidates, internally or externally? Because if the answer to that is, oh, you were beaten by the slightly stronger candidate, and that's the feedback that you're getting, well, I'm afraid you're not creating inclusivity or equitable potentials for the future with that at all.
Yeah, certainly. I've heard that people are really eager to get feedback if they're unsuccessful, and I definitely
It's a
think
fair
it's not a big
exchange for the
ask.
investment given, in my view.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you, Pete. Some really good thoughts there and suggestions from the candidate's perspective. Sam, you mentioned apply, but can you share any other thoughts with regards to how you've are more inclusive in terms of your recruitment processes? I've heard that sometimes candidates are asking for questions up front and things like that. Do you have any other
Yeah,
thoughts and
just before I
ideas?
move on to that, I was just going to pick up on Pete's comment around feedback, because that is one of the benefits of applied, because candidates go through this process of completing SIF questions, sometimes multiple choice questions, and then also the CVs get scored as well based on the information that's being pulled out of their in relatable, transferable skills and experience. All of that information goes into the applied platform. Okay, thank you. So when a candidate's unsuccessful, they get a
Sorry, I can hear
diagram.
someone's. Sorry, Sam, not to cut you.
That's
I
right.
think someone needs to turn their mic off. I can hear someone's phone call or something. Sorry, Sam, go ahead.
That's okay, no problem. So one of the benefits is that candidate does get feedback from each of those stages of their application through the process. But also we are very mindful that candidates have spent the time completing an application to apply for our organisation, and particularly when they've got through to any stage of the interview process, it's really important to give that feedback, because they might not have been successful on this particular occasion, but that doesn't mean that there isn't potentially another role for them, or that they, we want them to go away having had a good experience of Charity Bank. So it is really important that they have that positive journey through the whole experience, whether they are successful with us or not. So in terms of, we have had candidates, just thinking around sort of the neurodiversities, quite often candidates actually applying for positions with ourselves and coming for an interview can get quite nervous. We can all get quite nervous going through to an interview and doing all of that preparation, can't we? And thinking, oh my goodness, what type of questions are they going to ask us? And there is some thoughts around giving candidates some information in terms of what we're looking to ask in terms of the interview questions, and that's something that we haven't quite moved into yet, but we certainly give information to the candidates about how long is that interview process going to be, who's going to be involved in it, what's expected of them. Will they be, what sort of type of questions will they be, what sort of areas will we be delving into, and sometimes we do some kind of sort of testing as to what does that look like and what are we looking to get out of that. So trying to give a little bit of information to the candidate to reassure them of what that journey looks like while they're being interviewed with us, so they can do a bit of preparation ahead and not be put so much on the spot. Which for some is absolutely fine, but for others can find that a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, certainly. I think if we can ease people's nerves, I think we can definitely help them to perform better in the interview. So that does sound like a really positive step. So moving on to the next question, which is really around, organisations and the work they're doing around EDI. And with regards to their employer branding and their messaging, what steps have organisations taken to create a welcoming and more inclusive work environment for all employees, regardless of their background? Murphy, I don't know if you can kick us off on this one, on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously at Careers for Change, this is kind of where we would hand our candidates over, but we absolutely can advise and we support our clients with sort of advice around things they can do to make it a better environment and more inclusive. I think, having a really clear EDI policy and training available for all your staff that is mandatory is really important. Embedding things like cultural calendars so that people don't have to come forward and share parts of their life, people are aware and are celebrating all angles of that, and having recruitment processes in mind of cultural holidays, but also of parental responsibilities and leave that might overtake it. We don't want to be having lots of interviews during half terms, etc., because it puts particularly disadvantage. I think the other things are, featuring diverse voices within your leadership, particularly at boards, really celebrating that and having a clear understanding about what we talk as diversity, around gender, age, ethnicity, background, where you've grown up, what your ideas are, and really celebrating all that comes with that rather than just the kind of key obvious ones. And then sharing impact metrics, being really open about where you are as an organization. You know, if you're talking about being welcoming and using imagery that suggests that your internal staff are more diverse than you are, that's a problem. If it's about bringing in partners and specialists onto your interview panels to create a more inclusive environment, that's also great. Or partnering with organizations to offer mentoring opportunities and networks specific for individuals who will want to feel more seen and part of something, which is one of the things that we do at Careers for Change. We're really keen to introduce our candidates to different networks that we're part of and make sure that there are places to develop those peer networks, not only inside an organisation, but surrounding it as well.
Some really great ideas there. And I guess I feel that the candidates are interviewing the organisation, right? Especially if they're from an underrepresented group or they've got concerns, they are going to be looking at the websites and checking out your socials. And it definitely shouldn't be performative. But I do think that it is important for organisations to share this information so that it is accessible for candidates to really get an idea of what the culture is and how they will feel when they join the organisation if they're successful. Pete, any thoughts from you, again, from the candidate perspective? Kind of what things are they looking for when they're checking out the organisation to see if they want to apply for the roles?
Well, Murphy's just given a brilliant segue to one little point, really, because she's covered everything amazingly. But I think we have since 2017 had the gender pay gap as the most reliable source of data for anything inclusivity related. I think that's fair to say, given that there's a lack of data elsewhere, which begs the question why, but that's how it is. The very fact that the gender pay gap doesn't get talked about as often as it does is another nod to the fact that there's a lot of words, lots of imagery, Murphy's word, brilliant word, lots of imagery that actually surround how organizations like to present themselves. But it's actually really quite hard to get the cut through and actually find out what it's really like until you're there. And to your point of candidates interviewing the employer or the would-be employer, one of the only things you can take before you start, particularly, certainly if it's an organization above 250 plus employees, is what the gender pay gap tells you and what the trends of the gender pay gap are. Yeah, the gender pay gap in isolation, there'll be very few who have a gender pay gap that they can present that you could say that epitomizes inclusivity and equity. But if the trend is forward looking and it's shown significant progress over 4 or 5 years, that organization is fully entitled to call itself progressive. And I think that's what is the start point of that interrogation of what does the employer look like. I think there's a million other clues out there, you know, whether there are employee networks and peer networks, community groups within organizations, certainly organizations of size. The ones that have those seem to be the ones that in my space are pushing more the change agendas. So I'd be looking at those. I think I like to look at the composition of a boardroom, and if I find that the minoritized groups are only the NEDs, I need to go another layer and another layer again to actually ask myself, is that just the imagery that they want to present, or actually are those NEDs who are from the minoritized group, do they actually have a stakeholding and do they have a shaping of the business direction? Because if they don't, really they are then performative and they're actually not driving through change and becoming role models and accessible individuals to people from what minoritized group. And then I come back to my latter point in last answer of feedback. I think every single aspect of what you do with an organization in learning about them before you join, the best measure you'll get, as in the qualitative measure, is what feedback you've been given and how you've been treated in being given that feedback as you progress through. And you'd be amazed how many people take a job just because they've been told they're the best candidate, but actually in being told that the best candidate, completely relax in wanting to understand and in sort of almost interpret what the feedback tells them of their journey, and tells them of what the next stage of their journey is. And therefore the flip is also true. Those that aren't successful, they need to know, and then want to know, quite rightly, more of what the feedback looks like, so that they can actually use it as a beneficial moment in time. And I think the organisation that treats you with the respect that you've invested in coming looking at my business, and therefore you're going to get actionable, constructive feedback, is an organisation that's telling me at its heartbeat is desiring to be equitable and inclusive.
Yeah, some good points there. One of the things that I've seen that just came to mind was as you get to latter stages of the interview process, you can come in and talk to colleagues in the business. This is before the final offer is made. So you get to actually hear that feedback about the culture from colleagues that maybe are not on the interview panel. And I think that's also quite a nice thing to do, because you can really get a feel for the culture, kind of get to know kind of day, but before you kind of seal the deal. So I think that's also something that organizations can consider, and something that I've really benefited from in the past. Okay, so moving on then, we did touch on data a bit in that question with regards to gender pay gap, and obviously organizations will need to prepare for the disability and ethnicity pay gap with the new Labour manifesto in the coming years. But Sam, I know you have mentioned some other forms of data that you have that kind of help you in terms of metrics and kind of inform your recruitment strategies. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, again, we're very early into this sort of journey, I guess, in terms of we didn't have data and information available to us really, because we were very manual before we implemented the Apply platform. We've had to wait a period of time. We're not a huge recruiter, so we've had to wait a little bit of time to be able to pull this data together. But it has allowed us not only to look at the time to recruit, but also in terms of how diverse each stage of the recruitment process is in terms of each of the roles, and also where those candidates have come from. So we're able to go back and sort of analyse how diverse the candidates are that each agent has put forward to us as well, because we do tend to use agencies quite a lot. But also in terms of if they have come direct from our website and social media, again, how diverse was that pool of candidates that applied for the role, and the sort of journey through each stage of that process. So it just helps us to think about who we're going to use or where we're going to advertise each of those roles going forward, and sort of really think about that. And one of the things that we've been looking at for kind of our next wave of recruitment is that sort of targeting particular job boards, perhaps to really get that reach out to a more diverse group of candidates.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And I know that data can be very helpful in these processes to kind of really help and understand what improvements can be made, and also to just track how much progress is being made. And one thing that Peter touched on that we haven't really covered, and I'd like to put it out to the attendees to maybe speak to in the chat, or maybe to share their views, is on board recruitment, and if the processes are any different to kind of general recruitment for others in the organisation. It'd be good to get your thoughts on that in terms of the diversity of the boards and how that influences the organisation as a whole, but also how you recruit for new boards, because I have heard other social investors saying that can also be a challenge, and we haven't really touched on that. I don't want to give it to the panel because I haven't prepped them for that question, but it'd be great to hear from any of the participants if they'd like to share that. We've got one more question, so if you do have any thoughts or comments, do please pop them in the chat, and then we're going to go to the Q&A, so please do get ready for that. And for the last question, we really want to talk a bit about collaboration. So how can recruitment consultancies and organizations collaborate more effectively to address the challenges of diverse hiring and create a more inclusive workplace? So Murphy, I'm going to go to you with this one. How can collaboration be used to kind of make this process easier for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of different ways. I think events like today are a brilliant way to kind of have the conversation and cross-pollinate ideas. I think there's a need to develop some industry EDI standards, creating that to be aspirational as opposed to a kind of bottom level is a challenge, but I think something that we should be working towards. And I think organisations like Careers for Change can be a huge part of pushing that forward, from those kind of, emerging leaders, early careers, all the way up to the NED and board levels as well. I think securing leadership commitment and resources to understand the importance and ways of doing things, embedding the language and getting that buy-in sort of from all angles of the organisation. I think investing in training programs, networks, letting your staff have time to be part of networks and to go to events to understand what their role is and how they can acquire networks that will support their career development. And also focusing on recruitment, but also retention and progression. One of the things around data that sort of to the last question is that importance of exit interviews. Do all this data driven at the early stages, but actually the meaning behind that data is, who's progressing, who's staying, and if those numbers aren't where they need to be, and if they're not reflective of the interview pages, then there's a challenge there and something that we can actually do something about. So yeah, events, networks, being really transparent. Sorry, that's my doorbell. with where you are and sharing those learnings as well. America's really good at kind of going, we tried this, it didn't really work. And in the UK, we, we'll speak about what's gone well and often hide what hasn't under the carpet. And it's time that we change that. Yeah,
certainly. And I think the Diversity Forum is a great space to do that. And just having these kind of conversations today, we've heard from our signatories that, inclusive recruitment is a challenge sometimes. And I think having these spaces where we can be quite honest about what's worked well, but as you said, what hasn't worked quite well is also really important. And also sharing opportunities. I think it'd be good, again, to get some thoughts with regards to the talent pool, and are we also looking at social enterprises in terms of potential candidates? If your experience is from a social enterprise, can that cross over into a social investor in terms of being more inclusive and looking at other kind of career pathways into working for social investors? I'm going to go back to the board question. I think, Murphy, are you happy to have a go at that one for us?
Yes, absolutely. So board areas, NED appointments are an area that we're really interested at Careers for Change. We get asked by a lot of our candidates what opportunities there are and how they can get into them and how to find one that they're really connected to. So we're growing this piece of work at the moment. If anyone wants to chat afterwards, do reach out to me. I'm really happy to talk to you about it, and what we're looking to do. I think there are definite differences and there are different responsibilities, particularly if you're working with a regulated organisation where there does need to be sort of qualifications in place, but there's also so much more opportunity in terms of bringing in that diversity of thought and representing the organisations that you're supporting. You just touched there on the use of kind of social enterprise and actually working with beneficiary groups to pool candidates and having that kind of insight from the ground level. And I think NED roles and board roles are such a great opportunity to prove to candidates that we are actually invested in doing that and having that representation story at that higher level that will sort of feed down through organisations. But I think the onboarding process with boards is a longer one and one that needs to be done more thoughtfully in some cases. If you're meeting every 6 weeks or so, you're not going to be able to feed into an organisation as quickly as you were as a full-time member of staff. So I think we're really happy to kind of help develop strategies on how to onboard effectively, what needs to happen for readiness and, that kind of early training opportunities and working with, external boards who can help facilitate some of that early onboarding for new board members and NEDs is really important.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, some great tips and insights with regards to board recruitment. And that's the kind of final question. I don't know if anyone else on the panel would like to say anything more while we wait to see if anyone else has got any questions or if anyone wants to raise their hand to speak and share their thoughts. Mel, hi, would you like to, you put a comment in the chat there, would you like to come and share your thoughts? I'll see if I can spotlight you. Sorry, I can't see you.
I'm here, you can probably hear me.
I can hear you, there you are.
Okay.
Okay,
yeah, no, I was just while I was listening to everybody speaking, this is something, so all the things that people have spoken about in terms of things that we can do and some good practice, it really resonates and I hear it. But one of the things that I have been grappling with more recently is when we talk about we aren't diverse enough, and then when I talk to people and I realize that different people's view of what diversity is very different. So in some cases, I suppose gender diversity is often where people go or start with, and that perhaps goes back to Peter's piece around at least some of the visibility of the data. And then we can also have representation of the communities that we serve. And then more recently, I've realised that from talking to people, quite often what they're talking about is social mobility in terms of having a wide range of perspectives. I suppose I feel like we have made some progress, and I'm doing quite a broad we, not necessarily just us, but we have made some progress in acknowledging that different voices and different perspectives are good, but probably quite a lot of us are still in the position where that's a minority of our board rather than. So I'm just interested to know what people think a good balance looks like for diversity of voices. And I suppose again this is inherent tension or challenge. Maybe I think we use it as a little bit of a crutch at times about, you know, we're running investment organisations and we need to have people with investment experience. I'm definitely not saying we don't need any people with investment experience, but what does good balance look like in diversity? And I'm just interested in anybody else's views, really.
Does anyone want to dive in? I've got some thoughts, but does anyone else want to share their thoughts first?
After you, Murphy, go.
We're all keen to get involved.
It's a great question, that's why.
It is. There's tons of ways to answer it. I think there's practical things you can do. There's the missing person challenge, which I can send you over the framework for, that's kind of useful to get teams thinking. And kind of really do practical ways of, you know, what's not happening in the conversation. I think the most important thing with diversity is being representative of your stakeholders, your beneficiaries. And so starting there with kind of understanding your audiences, I guess, and seeing is there anyone who's not being represented at a decision-making level, can be a useful way of doing it. And then being really clear about why you've decided that. It's, you know, it's going to be a continuous learning. We're never going to have it exactly right because the world changes quickly, right? And so do our organizations and our audiences. But having a clear strategy of we are focusing our diversity on representing the voices of these, you know, areas, because that's where our funds are based, or that's where our impact focus is. So I think it's kind of deciding what you're doing and then being transparent about it, and then you can, you know, work with organisations like us to help sort of bring those in practically. But yeah, I have to share out that missing person framework to anyone who'd found it useful.
Brilliant, thank you, Murphy. I'd love to see that as well. Pete, over to you.
Well, no, just to acknowledge Mel's great question. Really, I think it's every single organisation will turn a little bit, to Murphy's point, upon its own purpose and values. But I just try and keep bringing it back to the simplicity of, even though it's not simple, it's actions, not words, that matter. You can create and write whatever narratives or whatever imagery that you wish, but how are you doubling down on those with the actions that your business takes? And that goes right from the diversity of interview panels, which is the first element of your experience, right through the way in which your career may evolve with that organization. But increasingly, for me, it's bringing people, almost multi-generational people, to the table, because I think certainly by the mortgage space, you actually now almost have three layers available. You have the 60-somethings, you have the 40-somethings, and you have the 20-somethings. So you actually almost now have three generations available. That's where the rich tapestry of diversity can really be drawn from, because I know that as a nearly 60-something guy with three kids all in their 20s. I just know I am out of touch with some of the stuff that they have massively educated me on. And for me, Mel, the one perhaps circle that was within that question that you didn't quite bring out is, I'd always be wanting to challenging viewpoints with someone from the different age dynamics that you don't have. You know, it might be a very young board, and therefore you might want somebody with maturity of some description. But I think in general boards are mature, and what they lack is the engagement with people who are at the early stages of their career, looking upwards and looking into the social world very differently to the social world that others would.
Any thoughts, Mel, before I share some thoughts?
Well, thank you for the briefing. Love that. Thank you, Murphy. I have that. Pete, I was going to send you a heart for that. I love the age dynamic piece of being, I think we're not only local in terms of geography, but I think probably have some similar perspectives. So really useful and lovely to hear yours, and I suppose I have a slight follow-up question to think. It doesn't necessarily have to answer it now, but the other piece I'd really be keen is, to some extent with boards, the actions are easier. I'm not sure easy is the right word. I think it becomes more complex when it becomes exec, particularly where turnover, if it's a very small number of people and your turnover is fairly low, actually thinking about how you can make that change. Again, anybody else has got more thoughts on that, but maybe one for another time. I'll let everybody else have a go. Atlin, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I just wanted to go back to the poll because it's interesting that obviously it's just a snapshot, but the top area really is the lack of diversity in leadership and board positions. People have said that this is a major issue and a challenge. And so again, back to wanting to think about the actions that people are taking. It's obviously a key area that social investors really need to think about. And obviously it has a real impact on the organization itself, the decisions they make, how inclusive and diverse they are in terms of how it impacts their social enterprises. And so I guess it's just for me just to think about, what is best practice? What support can we offer as a diversity forum, and what actions are organizations actually trying to take to change it? I have heard a lot of people saying it's very difficult, the talent pool isn't there, or the turnover is very low, as you said, Mel. But again, I want to hear more about the actions people are taking as opposed to some of the reasons why they haven't been able to make a change, which is what I tend to often hear. Okay, any other thoughts or questions in the chat here? Does anyone else want to come to the table? Mel, I'll take you off the spotlight if that's okay. And if anyone else wants to come and share their thoughts or just put something into the chat, that would be great. So someone had more of a reflection than a question to share. Would it be possible to pass on anonymously? Yes, of course. Please do share it anonymously. I don't know if you want to send it to me via email on info@diversityforum.org.uk. That would be great. And oh, Alice, I'll put the graphic up again. Is that what you wanted to see? The table? Let me just do that again. Bear with. Any other thoughts or questions then? We've got another 10 minutes, so it'd be great to use that time to get the discussion going. Again, if anyone's got any great best practice, things that have worked really well in their organization. Daniel, do you want to share? Come off mute and I can put the spotlight on you, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, it was me off mute before, so I was clumsily.
I tried to find you. Sorry, bear with me while I
yeah,
try to.
I'm here.
Have you got your camera on?
I have got my camera on. If you can see me, I've got a really clumsy question that I couldn't try to phrase in the box, but it was going to come out wrong. So it's probably going to come out wrong anyway, and I'm very nervous that this is recorded. So please forgive this. This is from genuine vulnerability. There are often discussions that we have when we have teams that have not enough diversity. Let's just pick on gender diversity for an easy start. And so we are looking to recruit somebody into a role where we want to have, basically, we want there to be, well, we want to exclude men from it, if I'm honest. We want to create a stronger team because we know that diversity in that particular team will be stronger if there are more diversities. So the question is there room for, whether it's gender only but maybe it's a wider question, shortlists? If we know that we're frankly not going to, so we have this debate internally, and there are some people in the organization who feel very strongly that we should do this, and others who feel very strongly that we shouldn't do this. And I just am interested in what is good practice, best practice, ways of not wasting people's time, being honest, being real, but also trying to effect change more quickly than we can by just waiting for society and other things to overcome.
Oh, thank you, Daniel, for sharing that question. I'm going to go to Sam, if that's okay, to go with this one first.
Hi, my thoughts really are that right from the start, you need to go back to your job description and the advert that you're writing and make sure that your language is attractive to both genders. You can find very much the words kind of leadership, managerial can be very male focused, and actually again Applied has that advantage that it has an ability to be able to put your job description in and actually look at the gender used in terms of language, but also the level of language being used. So whether it be targeting kind of graduates or a younger group, so that you can really analyse the job description and advert that you're putting out to make sure that you're widening that scope. You can't target obviously females only, but you can target a wide group of candidates because it ultimately is about finding the right person for the job. And so it's just really going back to basics, looking at really what is it that you need for that person to do and making sure that you're using the right language to open that pool of candidates up. I think Murphy talked about imposter syndrome earlier, and it's been found that quite often females will not put themselves forward to something if they don't think that they can do it. They potentially can, but they sort of lack that confidence. Whereas generally, men might have that, yeah, I can do that kind of attitude. So it is around making sure that language is used effectively when you're going out to advert.
Thank you, Sam. Murphy, do you want to go in? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think all really good points. I think being transparent about why you're seeking a new role and having a diversity and inclusion statement as part of your job description is a good way to demonstrate that you're aware of a lack of female presence within particular teams, and so this is a driving force for you. I think it's important not to put in barriers for other people, but to be clear, and particularly if at shortlisting you are going to be preferential to female candidates, it might be worth embedding anonymized CVs so you can't have biases around names, but you can be really clear about the process and then report back on that. You know, we were looking to grow our diversity, particularly in gender. We changed the language within our job descriptions. We've anonymized CVs to ensure that we aren't following negative patterns. This is the result. And, you know, if you end up hiring someone who wasn't fitting the characteristics of what you were looking for, then you've still followed the process and been really good around creating equitable opportunities, and clearly transparent about it. And it might be worth embedding some, I don't know, female networks as women in social finance, an organisation. Perhaps it'll be good to, you know, link up with them for your female colleagues to have sort of representatives and clear networks, so it's more attractive for women coming in to feel that they're going to be benefiting from an external peer network also.
Yeah, brilliant. Some great suggestions there. I know Pete had some as well. I mean, my thoughts were around the personal development and succession planning in terms of how that works within organisations, and it may not always be appropriate depending on the size of the organisation, but I do think that there should always be a way for people within the organisation to be able to obviously progress their careers, and that could also be an opportunity as well, perhaps. Pete, did you want to share something as well on this one?
Well, just applaud Daniel first of all for being vulnerable. That's a great start to anything that you're trying to navigate and understand. I think it sounds very obvious, Daniel, but it depends on your current mix of female to male and size of business to a degree. But what they've got to take the confidence away from, and whether that be you being able to back up a diversity statement, as Murphy suggested, with policies that actually evidence it, as well as just a statement that are more female friendly. I think it's making sure that the touch points for the process, it should be the same, whatever the the gender, but the touch points actually just become very cognizant of the fact that if you're a very male dominated firm, you can't load the interview process with just male dominated touch points, expecting then a female to say this is going to be a welcoming, inclusive environment, isn't it? So you kind of have to get your own house sort of thought through and understood first before you can then start authentically being able to engage and bring diverse backgrounds into the process.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Any thoughts on the responses there? Was that helpful at all?
So most of those responses, I think that we do and are paying attention to anyway. I think the one that we perhaps are not, which might be the compromise, is one thing that Murphy said around being explicit that we have a strategy to improve our diversity in this particular team. So we've seen, I've frankly seen teams that are 100% women and 100% men, and they've been the worst performing teams in our business. And when there was some gender diversity brought into both of those teams, they both improved. So kind of we're doing this from a performance basis, but I think I am hearing that it's as well, perhaps it's even unattractive for women to see a women-only advert because it looks tokenistic, even though it might not be tokenistic. It might just be, I just don't want to waste a whole load of men's time because I want to we believe in the strength of the team. But I think that's a clear guide. So thank you, appreciate everyone's wisdom, and
thank you so much for the question. Appreciate it. Okay, so we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to do the roundup now. We've had some conversations with regards to secondment in the chat there, so if you've got any thoughts on that, please do leave it in the chat. But I'm going to just wrap up now and to say thank you everyone for joining. Really a great discussion there, and I hope you found it beneficial. I do believe that there's lots more discussions to be had. It seems to be a topic that many social investors could do with some additional support and help with, and sharing of best practice. So, and just to say that our next webinar is on the 2nd of December. That will be our last webinar for the year. I can't believe it's going to be December already, but that's going to be touching on inclusive leadership and executive action. And so again, we're going to have those leaders we've been talking about on the call, talking about their role in creating inclusive social investment sector. So do please join us. It would be great to have you. And any other closing comments from any of the panel before we say our goodbyes? Anything else, any last comments anyone wants to share? I think we've covered it.
Thanks for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Some really good input from all of you. So thanks so much for taking the time, and thanks everyone for joining as well. Take care, and if you want to share the recording, it will be on our YouTube channel.
Thanks,
all right, take care.
Thanks,
You're
everyone.
welcome. Bye everyone.
Thank
See you.
you.
Bye
Bye.
now. Bye.